What is the one thing that volleyball gave you that no amount of money could have?
Confidence.
What your life actually looked like when you came back to Australia and were representing the country?
I would train during the day, lift during the day, and then afternoon would then be coaching. That would be the money to come in to support. So I still wasn't getting paid to train or play. And when I would go on tour, there was always costs involved with that.
From your experience, what is the stark reality of being a female volleyballer in Australia compared to being a male volleyballer in Australia?
The reality for male or female, regardless, is that you're going to have to leave Australia.
Welcome to 4TG. On average, 46% of elite athletes in Australia earn less than $23,000 a year. Now, that sits below the poverty line. And in sports that sit outside the professional leagues, the ones that don't have the broadcast deals or the naming rights sponsors or high-profile men's competitions driving that revenue, the number is often lower. For the women who even captain national teams in these sports, the reality is pretty stark. That you can represent your country at the highest level and you still need another job to pay the rent. My guest today is one of those athletes. Kelly Porter was captain of the Australian women's volleyball team. She played in national championships, she's toured internationally, and she went to the NCAA Div 1 collegiate sport in the United States. Now, volleyball is the fourth most played sport in the world, and Kelly has never earned a living from it. Today, Kelly is the National Junior Head Coach with Volleyball Australia. She is accredited in athlete wellbeing, leadership, and youth mental health. And she's also the founder of Lean Edge, a support platform for junior athletes and their parents and families navigating elite sport alongside them. This is a conversation about what the funding gap actually does to female athletes. It's not just about their bank accounts, but it's a big reflection on their sense of self, their mental health, and who they become when the sport that they have sacrificed absolutely everything for doesn't sacrifice back. Kelly, welcome to the 4TG podcast.
Thanks for having me, Kylie. It's good to be here.
Absolute pleasure to have you. And we were introduced through our mutual friend, Gemma. So Gem, this is a special shout out to you.
She's also back from her ACL as well. So
she is.
Extra shout out for her.
Yes. And she's absolutely smashing it out there on the field. So she should be very proud of that. But she gave you glowing reviews. She said there is someone that you need to interview for 4TG. She's the epitome of it. If you think about leadership, she embodies it. And yeah, she could have went on for days about how good you are. So I'm very excited that you're on here and we can have a chat all things volleyball or indoor volleyball more specifically.
She's one of my favourite teammates to ever play with. So that's very nice of her. And yeah, any chance I get to chat about sport, always, particularly female sport.
Yeah, we love it. Big fans. Now, we start every podcast at 4TG with the Snap Fitness rapid fire questions. So I'm going to hurl 3 questions your way and just say whatever comes to mind.
Sure.
Alrighty. What is the one thing that volleyball gave you that no amount of money could have?
Confidence.
Good. I like the giving one-word answers. That's very rare. All
Short
right.
simple.
Yeah, I love that. The second one, what is the hardest conversation you've ever had as a captain?
Whether or not a team should stay in a hotel or move to a better hotel.
Really?
I'll leave it there.
We might have to unpack that one.
Yeah, it was not my best form of leadership.
All right, we're definitely digging into that one later. And finally, if volleyball had paid a living wage, would have you stayed for longer or do you think you would have left sooner?
I would have stayed.
Yeah, that one's a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely the body was struggling a little bit and there was some other things on the side coming into account, but I think retiring at 27 I think we've got more in the tank if there was something there to help the tank out a little bit.
Yeah, gotta hope so because I'm 28 and I'm hoping there's some more left in me.
You've already cooked me, so that's fine.
So, Kel, you've had an unbelievable background when it comes to volleyball and you've traveled the world. You're now a coach yourself, also traveling the world and having a huge impact on the future generation of volleyballers. But I want you to tell the audience a little bit more about your journey. What was sport like growing up for you? And what did your life begin to look like when you started taking volleyball more seriously?
Yeah, I sort of nod because it still baffles me that we even got as far as we did. I mean, there was, I think for the most part, I remember trialing for basketball at rep one time in Melbourne, and I got to the trials and I was like, this is way too serious. I don't like this at all. And for some reason, I just never felt that way about volleyball. Like, a sport was always fun, something silly to do on the side. I didn't never took it too seriously. And then just progressively over the years, I started playing volleyball in high school. It found its way of just like, I really care about this. And I think it was, I don't know, I think I had a couple of good coaches and some really great teammates. And I think I've always been someone that plays for people. Like, if I feel really bonded with something or someone, I'll play for it. And I think I just had some really good early experiences. But shit, I was so shy. I was so introverted, and I was terrified to really step outside the comfort zone and trial for clubs or state teams or anything like that. And so it was a really long time until I found some, I guess, confidence was something that I really struggled with, to then be able to go and make a state team and stuff like that. So it's incredible because I didn't trial for a state team, which was in volleyball, especially indoor. That's kind of your first step to being able to go into anything and kind of know the lay of the land in the sport. I couldn't even find the courage to go to a club trial and join a club. I was just so stressed and nervous. Eventually, it was sort of a slow burn. I actually got picked up just out of high school to go to a junior Oz camp, and it was the single worst experience I think I've still had to this day. I was the pin-up girl of what not to do. I had no mates there. And I said, I don't want to play this sport anymore. And I had one other friend that sort of just said, hey, come to club, and it's better than that. Don't worry about the Oz stuff. Don't worry. And I got told at that camp, if you leave, now, which I did, I left early, you'll never play for Australia again. So okay, no worries. I just want to go. This is not my thing. So then, yeah, like 8 years later, when you're playing for Australia, that was shocking to me, but it was purely just out of the fact that I wanted to get away from home. So that's where the college idea came from. I just wanted to go and see the world and just get out of my little, bubble from high school. I still got to college and I was like, cool, this is fun. The volleyball still kind of took a back seat. And then I met a couple of people. I had a great college coach my first school, and I started to give a shit. Like, I just started to care. And we got to our national championship my first year overseas, and we lost. And I was the only one that didn't touch the court. I'd had a really rough rookie year. And I just remember the next season coming back, and I just said to the girls that I'd already played with, like, we're not doing that again. I don't want to do that again. That was a waste of time. And so we ended up playing 57 games. We lost no games, won our national championship, and I signed with the Division 1 school, NCAA, for my last 2 years over there. It was just this like backflip of everything that had, fun was sort of out the door. It was fun, but it was serious. And I was suddenly kind of good at what I was doing. And then, from there, just found some national team opportunities and found my way in that space. I think the thing that's always driven me is the connections first. If I make good connections to start with, then that brings the best out in me. And I kind of started to figure that out. So at the national team, I just sort of focused on my relationships with people, made some good friends. And then by the second year, I sort of feel comfortable enough to start really, I guess, trying to kind of play at that level. I think it always takes me a little bit to get to that point. So I don't know how we got there. My height says we shouldn't have got there. My lack of sporting prowess in the family says we shouldn't have got there, and somehow we found a way. And I think it was, again, I'll keep saying it was a slow burn for me.
Yeah, but I think that is such an important lesson for a lot of listeners too, that you don't have to be good from a young age to make it. Like, a lot of the time you just stayed in it, right? You kept showing up even when you had a rough rookie year, even when you're probably that anxious and shy. You just kept showing up. You didn't give up. And that's the thing. The people who make it are the ones who just don't give up, really, at the end of the day. So lots of lessons to be learnt from that. There's two more things in your story that I absolutely love that you said that I also think are worth highlighting. The first one being how you mentioned that you were so introverted and shy, and then you went on to captain the Australian side. Too often young people think that they need to have this, charisma about them. They need to be the best speaker in the group. They need to have all these motivational things to say. Often I think the introverted people make the best leaders because they're not in it for themselves. They're in it for absolutely everyone else. And when you're the captain, most people think, oh, I've got this big title now. Everything's on me and, on my shoulders. But your job is literally to help everyone else kind of accept yourself. So I think that's another thing to point out, that if you're not the most loud out there person, you can still be a fantastic leader. And the second point that I absolutely loved, you touched on the fact that you had one good coach and how that coach completely changed the trajectory of your sporting career. And isn't it amazing that people they can either have one really bad coach and it completely dismantles their confidence, it makes them drop out, and it actually affects a lot of areas outside of their sporting life as well. But just having one good coach can completely change not only the course of your sporting career, but in my opinion, the course of your life. So I think coaches listening to this too, don't undermine just how much power and influence you have on a child's life. So use your words very wisely, be a good example, and those things will stick with a kid or a young female for very, very long.
Yeah, and it only takes one, like you said. Like, you just need one in your corner. I've always said that. I've been lucky to have more than one, but at the time, he was prominent. And I think for coaches, it's about not trying to be that person. I think because you can't be that person for everybody anyway. So, you may get one player each year that finds their path because of you, but trying to be that person for every person that you come into contact with, so it's never going to happen. So I think it's about being authentically you as a coach as well, so that, you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea and you're not going to be what they need in that moment, but just the one or two that do, that's what matters.
So keen now to jump into the deep contrast that you would have experienced after playing NCAA Div 1 in the States, which is one of the most well-resourced collegiate sports systems in the world, and then coming back to Australia. Can you tell us about A, what it was like in the States, and then B, what it was like when you came back to Australia and how that kind of shifted your perception on volleyball and the reality of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great example I have is I was really lucky to talk to Jordan Larson, who's the previous USA volleyball indoor captain. She's the GOAT, is what she's known as over there. I had a Zoom call with her once, and she was asking me about how many staff we take on tour with us. And I said, oh, we've got 2 coaches and a physio and a manager, maybe. And she said, oh, they had 15 managers and staff that would go with them. And so, but that stems from their collegiate system of, stats people, and their medical staff is extensive. And I went to a relatively small Division 1, and we still had our own stadium, and, we had season ticket holders, and, the locker room is one thing that I feel like was the buying point for me at this school when I went on my first tour there. Was just like, oh, you get this huge space just to yourself, and that's just yours, and this common room and that sort of stuff that, we don't get anything like that here. And I think just the sheer love of the sport over there is suddenly, it's going crazy at the moment. It's really blown up since I've left, which is great, but we just don't get that sort of recognition here. So I think just for the sport alone of indoor volleyball, we do struggle to still sell tickets to things in this space, particularly on the indoor front. So that's a massive, how many people you get to play in front of. That was a major difference. But I think just the immediacy of support. I mean, obviously we had full gym access of what, the space was there. Stuff is very, for the national team here, was all done remotely via an app on your own. If you need some support, you need to call or send videos in. And so it's good, but it's clunky in that sense, that I think over there it's not flawless, but the clunkiness isn't there because you've just sort of got everybody on hand. And just the amount of people that are, I feel like there's the amount of Australians that there are in the whole population is how many volleyballers there are in the US, and more. It's just wild what that does in terms of what the coaching ability is and who you're up against, I think, as well. Just the quality of opponent is just so different. And the fact that you're still studying and that's supported in that space is just, I think it's a different world. The pressures are really different. They kind of own you when you've got that scholarship sort of sitting over your head. And so you've got to be able to step up to that challenge as well. But I do think just that clunkiness of support is what you come back to. And I think our national program does a good job, but it's very centralized. And then if you're not in that central spot of Canberra at the time that I was playing, you're sort of on your own a bit. And it's hard to be a teammate when you're doing it on your own. It requires that little bits of extra effort. when you're decentralized like that.
So paint the picture for the audience of what your life actually looked like when you came back to Australia and were representing the country and, obviously captaining that team as well. How often were you training? Were you having to work as well to try and pay the bills? And how did you fit everything in?
Yeah, so that's when coaching started. So I had the option to move to Canberra the year that I'd moved home. Our national team season is sort of anywhere between like May and September, so kind of the middle 6 months of the year. And I'd found a work at Wesley College, actually in Melbourne, and they run a volleyball program that's the first 3 months of the year and the end 3 months of the year, but it's paid 12 months through the full 12 months. So I kind of timed my work, the key working aspect, with the first 3 months of the year and the end 3 months of the year. So the middle six was me on tour and away. And so what that did was I would train throughout the day. I actually made the decision not to move to Canberra permanently. I would just spend periods of time there. And I trained full time with the Centre of Excellence in Melbourne, which is the Greater Melbourne Volleyball Academy. And I trained with 14 boys on a men's height net with my former academy coach. They were all these young guys that were prepping to go to college. I'd just graduated. So I was sort of the old duck with these young guys, 18, 19.
Taught them a
But
thing or
on the
two?
men, yeah. Well, I mean, it was probably the best thing I ever did because I lifted weights like they did. I trained on their high net. So suddenly my vertical, which has always been the talking point of how small you are, how high can you jump, suddenly was the highest it had ever been. And I was playing at the speed of the men's game, which I found to just be a lot more fun. And then I came into that next year of national team season, probably the best I ever had been. But it meant that I would train during the day and lift during the day, and then afternoon would then be coaching, that would be the money to come in to support. So I still wasn't getting paid to train or play. And when I would go on tour, there was always costs involved with that. And it ebbed and flowed depending on what funding we may have been able to get from, say, AIS Sports Commission, depending. And so then I'd be away or up in Canberra for sort of that middle 6 months of the year, paying to live, all that sort of stuff. Most of it was any money I made, I paid for volleyball. And if it wasn't for volleyball, it was gym memberships, protein powders, physio, it was anything related to volleyball. I'm not sure I'd actually spent money on anything else other than that for probably 2 or 3 years in that like condensed time frame.
Yeah, we talk a lot about how there's not only the financial costs for female athletes at this elite level to play sport, but also a reel that I recently posted was about a English rugby player. She did a post about the opportunity costs and the time costs of being a female athlete. So as you say, it's not just paying for your gym memberships, your boots, your physios, your medical costs and things like that, but it's the opportunity of you could be progressing in a career that's going to pay a lot more money than what you're currently on. You aren't getting as much super added. You aren't, getting to spend as much time with your friends, your family. As you said, everything was based around volleyball and spending all of your money on volleyball itself. So there's more than meets the eye when it comes to female athletes. And I just think it's so important to paint that picture as opposed to just saying, oh, well, we don't get paid as much. So from your experience, what is the stark reality of being a female volleyballer in Australia compared to being a male volleyballer in Australia?
Yeah, it's an interesting comparison. I think it depends on the position that you play in volleyball. So the positions that you play can sometimes have a huge impact on whether you're able to get professional contracts overseas. The reality for male or female, regardless, is that you're going to have to leave Australia. You're not going to be able to make money here as a volleyball player. It's just not an option. So if you're going to get better, if you're going to get any sort of reimbursement for your time and for your abilities, you're going to be leaving Australia. So coming to grips with that can be really difficult for some athletes to get to the point of it might be college or it's pro leagues overseas. And then within that is positions on the court. There are some that are more leaning towards getting bigger contracts overseas and others that don't. And then I think just the big contrast of female male is probably the support that it's really evened up on the male female side for indoor volleyball in particular. For beach, we don't need to go overseas and stuff. We've got programs that have funding here for beach, so it's probably more, I hate to say it, an indoor versus beach sort of thing in that sense of that we have centralized programs in that sense to help support some of the athletes, not all of them. They're still trying to get funding as well, absolutely, but I think it's become a little bit more even in that sense that you have to leave, and probably the first couple of years you're overseas playing professionally, you're not on very much money at all. And that's probably, it's similar for both the female and male athletes, but probably the development going into the male side for the past 20 years has been better than the women's. So probably the standard should be better in that sense. So the likelihood of getting contracts should be easier for the men, I would say. But we are slowly starting to get more girls over into college. It depends on the year of if we can find contracts overseas. I had a couple, but basically the leftover amount of money was going to be about $20 a month, for what I was getting offered. And I actually couldn't ask my family to help me anymore with that. It was the reason I said no to a couple of them in that first year to go over and play pro was you don't always get paid. You don't always get paid. It's a risky business over there. It's done so differently than it is here. And I just couldn't ask my parents to help me with doing that. They'd already done enough, I felt. And so if a contract had come where I felt like I could be sustainable, then sure. But it quickly enlightened me that I probably was going to really struggle to get that in that sense. So I think it's that you're going to have to find ways, you're going to have to work full time or part-time 0.8, whatever it is, and you're going to have to train early mornings or late nights to fit it in around. You're going to have a flexible environment that you can spend time on tour. And basically you're building a national team profile to then maybe hopefully get something overseas that you could get paid in.
Yeah.
But nothing here is going to pay you as a female volleyball player.
Right. So you're really putting all your eggs in your basket that you're going to go pro overseas.
Pretty much. If you want to make any money at all, it's not here.
Yeah. Very disappointing, isn't it? And I know that, volleyball in Australia, well, we've obviously got the 2032 Brisbane Olympic Games, which as a, qualifying host nation, we get a spot. So I'm interested to see how Australia will go and in your opinion, how you think we will go and what needs to happen between now and then to make sure the athletes are properly supported.
Yeah, well, I think we probably should have started yesterday of getting that right. I think we're already cutting it pretty fine in terms of at least getting the right people in the places of, this under 18 groups that I've just had, some of them I hope to see maybe in that 2032 team. That's sort of the trajectory of what we're looking at here. It's got a lot of work to do to be able to have a team that we're proud of having there. We get a team there, that's great, but we want to be competitive. We want to be able to put a show on and have fun with it and not show up and get beaten up. I think that's where I'm not sure what that looks like right now, because we're a long way from where we should be from the female perspective of stuff. But I think there's a lot of work to be done there. I think we're going to be relying on a lot of athletes to pay a lot of money in the next couple of years to give ourselves a chance. But I also am hopeful that we can, submit and include in strategies towards, funding from AIS or ASC, stuff like that, to be able to build a bit more of a platform to go, hey, we've got a team that needs some support over the next, particularly after 2028. What can we do to give 4 years worth of full-time training to a group of 20 girls to get 12 of them ready to go by the time that time frame comes? I don't know if it's enough time. We're obviously not going to qualify for 2028, but I think that's the best road we have at the moment. And I'm excited to see who might put their hands up for coaching and who might come out of the woodwork for volleyball at that point. But I think we've got a long way to go in terms of what that support looks like. And I genuinely don't know where it starts. I think that's above my pay grade, seeing as I'm at a $0 mark. But I think it's interesting what that can look like. And 6 years is not a long time to be able to build something that's going to require a lot of work.
Yeah, well, that's right. And I think we need to get a bit more creative with funding mechanisms and business models in sports similar to the States, because if we're relying on government funding and AIS funding, there's never going to be enough to go around. So in your time over in the US, do you know of anything that, the commercial side, what they did in order to be able to better fund the athletes?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed. I mean, I moved over there 12 years ago this year, and so I finished up 4 years later. But so it's been a while since I've been there, but since there's 2 pro leagues running now for indoor volleyball, that was never a thing. So a lot of my college friends were like, oh, I'm done in 4 years, I'll never get to play again. And in my head, I was like, well, you could still go play pro overseas, but that just wasn't even on their radar. But now there is actually pro leagues happening. Nebraska was able to fill a 95,000 person stadium of a football stadium to watch a volleyball game. And so that's generated heaps of interest in what the sport does. I mean, it's always been a bit of a staple sport over there, that female volleyball is, the men's is actually the one that struggles. They're the ones that are still trying to build their programs and get programs into schools. It's the women that are the priority in that sense. So that's where it's a cool change. It's very much a female priority sport over there. And I think it's just the ability of having that identity that like, look at this is American volleyball. And so they're able to build, I think the Nebraska one was basically a world record attempt, you know, how many to have the highest number of attendees to a volleyball game. And so they flooded this 95,000 person stadium and had this tiny court in the middle of a football field. And they played one of their games there under the skylight, like all that sort of stuff. It was unreal, but it's sort of prompted huge turnout now for that to happen. And so I think it's a mix between marketing, it's a mix between supporting your grassroots and getting more support through there, because there's a ton of volleyballers in school. We probably don't have the luxury of having things like an Oz kick to get kids earlier. So we lose them to the basketballs and the netballs and footies and stuff like that now, which is fine, but it makes it harder later on that you get, you know, the transition happens later. So you're not going to get as many that way. So I think it's continually finding ways to try and get, how do you get 5 and 6 year old kids playing? Because that's where we can start generating a bit more momentum. And like, that's where I started coaching. I started coaching a club team over there, and they were 6 year olds, and they were the cutest little kids you've ever seen.
How was the attention span on them?
Nil. But who cares? Like, they were just out there hitting the ball as hard as they could at each other, and it was awesome. But you wouldn't see that here. We're getting better, but it's a massive gap for us.
Yeah, no, definitely. So in your career, was there any chance of you ever going to the Commonwealth Games or the Olympics, or was Australia not in the run back in those days?
Yeah, so last time we qualified for an Olympics was 2000. So that was the last time we had a female indoor team. We do a nice job on the beach qualifying ourselves through there. So we've had some really great success stories through the beach, which is amazing. I have a huge respect for the beach program. I'm just an indoor gal. So we've seen some really great representation through there. Our last opportunity was in 2020, actually, to go to Tokyo. So how that worked was, because China had won the previous gold medal, they'd already gone through, and then Japan was hosting, so they'd already gone through. So the Olympic qualifying tournament had one more spot to be able to fill that spot in. So in 2019, we had made our way to the point of an Olympic qualifying event. So we basically had to beat New Zealand, essentially. And we did. And we went to Olympic qualifiers the start of 2020 in Thailand. So it's 8 teams, pool play. Once you lose, you're done. That was our last chance to really, I think all of us knew it was hard going. Asian Federation is an extremely tough, competitive volleyball space, I suppose. But we were, you don't play every day and train as hard as you do to think you don't have a chance. Like, I don't think you should play like that. And we didn't. We were trying to throw all our eggs in one basket and just see what we were capable of. We also had the pool that had 3 teams in it. So the top 2 would go up. And so we knew if we could just win one game, we'd give ourselves an awesome opportunity. It was probably the most upsetting tour I've ever been on. I think it was, besides the outcome of losing both our pool games and getting knocked out, that was the hardest in terms of probably the female male divide I'd ever found in my time. So yeah, that was our last opportunity, and we haven't been able to kind of regather steam since then. We're doing all right at the moment, but I think that was a real kick. And then COVID hit about a month after we got home. So
tell us more about that. So what actually happened? What decisions were made that sort of, I guess, had a big disadvantage on the female team as opposed to the male team?
Yeah, so both teams had qualified to go to their separate tournaments. I can't remember where the men's was. Ours was in Thailand, and Thailand for the women's program, like Thailand female volleyball team is like, they're superstars, celebrities. Like, you get police escorted everywhere because they're just wild volleyball fans, it's so fun to play in. So we've lost. When you lose, you get kicked out of your hotel and you no longer have hosting support. So we still had, I think, maybe 4 days booked in of that trip till our flight home. Without any conversation with us at all, we were suddenly shunted to I think it was about a 2-star hotel in this town of Thailand that is not Phuket and beautiful or anything like that. There's some rough towns in Thailand where there's no food booked in for us. So there was no access to food. So that was going to be an additional cost in the end. We had an under 18 player with us, so she hadn't got proper care in that sense either. And we had, our coach at the time had booked in extra practice matches to play other clubs, and to basically we'll just carry on then. We'll just keep going. So there was no conversation about, what do we do now? We're kicked out. We've lost. We're not going to the Olympics. So that's the end of that cycle for us. Like there's no other games for at least 6 months. On the men's side, I think they had been projected to at least make the top four and be a competitor to actually qualify for the Olympics that year. That was they had dropped out of the top four, and that was not a great result for them. I think they were much more inclined to do that. I remember waking up one morning and we found on, social media that they were in villas in Bali. So they'd traveled from wherever they were to villas, not all of them, but some of them were in villas in Bali. Now, at no point am I suggesting that that was paid for by the organization. I have no idea how it planned out. But what it spoke to us as a team was that as it felt like we were girls, we won't have a conversation about what they feel like they want and need and would like to do with a trip that they are funding and would like to, but that conversation does happen with the men's team. And that's what it's always felt like, is that we have this real disconnect of like, well, you're in charge of the girls team, we will tell them and we'll plan everything for them, and they'll pay for it, and that's all good. And the men can do these things like, we've dropped out, so cool, we're bugger that, we're off to Bali, see you later, we're going to have a break. I don't know what we would have ended up doing, but I think it was just that reflection of, why does no one want to have that conversation with us? And so this is where the hotel situation came in, of do we leave this hotel we had girls with shin fractures, ankle problems. We had no elevator in the hotel. There were stains in the bed. Half the 6-foot girls didn't fit in the beds. There was no food. So we just got shunted into this hotel that was just crap. It's not that expensive over there. So my great captaining moment was like, we all go and we all leave and we'll go to a better one. And that just blew up in my face, because some could afford it, some couldn't afford it. But that was the thing. It was still about money, right? Like some could afford to go somewhere else, and others had already paid their money to go on this trip. They couldn't afford anything more. So that's where there was another disconnect in that sense. So it was a really disappointing time. It was sort of just, the girls will be right. They'll just stay and we'll send them home when they're ready. No worries. And that we ended up losing. I think there was 5 of us that ended up basically I came back because I felt like there was 4 others that never came back. And that was I think they'd been in the programs longer than I had and were basically fed up with that sort of feeling like that all the time. And then you get to an Olympic event and you feel it more than ever, and just feeling like you're not respected in that sense. That's what it felt like at that time.
Yeah. And that you're second-class citizens and you're not capable of making your own decision. It's just, it's patronizing, condescending, all of those words. And if that is your last experience of being a professional at the top level, and no wonder they drop out, and no wonder they would never want to get back into sport. That's the thing. It's just these,
and they're in sport. Like one of them's playing footy and she's doing great, and but not volleyball. They've stepped away from that. And so we lose the chance to have female coaches because they don't want to come back. I've always felt like, I just don't want people to have the same experience as that. What can I do to prevent that as a coach? But we lose great people because just chose not to have a conversation with them. And that's as simple as it is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So since you have now been coaching a lot of the young up and coming athletes, do you see some solid progression? I'm sure there's still areas that need to improve, but what do you think has been the biggest change since you were an athlete yourself?
I think there's a consensus around, first of all, athlete wellbeing. I think that is progressively getting better. And I mean, the head coach of the senior women's team right now he came in after all of that, and his job was to care for the girls. And so he's been amazing in that sense to show, really care and value these women. And not to say my coaches before that didn't do that. I think they're more governed in certain directions and taking on too much, to be honest. But I do feel like there's, my direction from the organization with the girls is, how do we support? How do we care? We want to listen to them. We want to provide opportunities to have conversations. So that feels like that's a very different approach, which has been really great. That fits what I wanted to do, but that's what I've sort of been encouraged to be like as well. So I think those small things are heading in the right direction. And I also think there's been a balancing act now with the men and the women's team. I feel like there's some camaraderie there that the funding for the men sort of has slowed down to the point that it's similar to the women's side now. It's not perfect, but it's better in that sense. So it feels more like we're sort of working together a little bit. The men's and the women's teams actually just toured scored together for the first time in I don't know how long. So, that feels like we're sort of, it's not the male volleyballers' fault that things happen, so it's working together, but also hopefully that they have an understanding that it hasn't always been easy for us either is important. And I do feel like there's more coaches just trying to say the right things and do the right things. And winning these can be part of a good supportive process. It doesn't just have to be a singular outcome.
That's right. It's often the byproduct of a whole lot of other stuff that's going on, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us now about what you're doing with Lean Edge. And obviously you mentioned yourself that in your experience, you found it overwhelming, confusing, and no set clear, I guess, roadmap for pathways and things for both the players, but most importantly as well, the parents to be able to navigate. So what are you doing with Lean Edge and what sort of problem do you hope to solve?
Yeah, so I think there's a gap there of like you either happen to find a mentor just along your own journey. There's someone that you can talk to. That's great. Or you have like a sports psych where you're trying to just figure out performance outcomes and how you best perform. And so I feel like there's a gap there of actually like there's a lot of other things going on for athletes about understanding themselves, understanding their values, hoping to create identities outside of just being an athlete or a member of this and goals that are unrelated to I want to play for Australia, because in my opinion, you might get a bit let down if that's your only goal, and you're going to miss a lot of great stuff around you if that's just it. So trying to reframe that sort of stuff. And then it's built off the fact that my mum and I come from a single mum, had no idea what we were doing at any moment of the process. And I think if you asked her now, she would say, I wouldn't want to do that again. And I hate feeling that that's what I put her through, despite the fact that it was what it appears to be very successful. And it was. And I had a really great time in moments of what I did. But I think she just felt so overwhelmed of not just financially burdened society, like, the community is not always what it appears to be either. Can I talk to a coach about this? Can I tell them this about you? Do you want me to? How do I navigate this car ride home conversation that's you haven't been selected or you've been dropped or you've whatever it is? How do I do that as a parent? As well as the fact that eventually one day I turned around and said, okay, I want to move to America for 4 years. Like, no, you can't do that. I will not. In this day and age, that's a different story now. Like parents are beyond stressed about the idea of their kids moving to the States. Political agendas change, all that sort of stuff. So it's built around just trying to help parents through that too, in a really low burdening financial way. It's time is money though, but it's supposed to just be through clubs and academies individually, whatever works for people, to just try and help go, you can ask that question. Maybe if you feel that way, we find a way to ask that question better, like, are we living vicariously through our children? I think that does happen, but it's just trying to help. Not every family comes from sport. And so how can we help the ones that don't to understand what we're in? Because it quickly goes from, this is really fun, I love this, to, okay, we're going to spend $10,000 on this in the next 6 months. It's a huge difference. And so how do we make those decisions?
So important. And I think the families where the parents did come from sport, well, they could probably be more destructive than, those who have had nothing to do with sport, because it's always they're living their dreams through them. And if they didn't make this level, they're trying to push their kids to, which just never ends well. So I think, there's such important conversations to have. And we always talk about the athletes, but I think we forget about the parents a lot, and the parents are huge stakeholders in, getting their kids to sport, getting them clothes, dressed, driven from here to there and fed. And there's so much to navigate. So a big shout out to parents of young athletes, because they're the real MVPs at the end of the day.
100%. And they ride it probably more than the athletes do. They're sitting there in the stands having to, whatever outcome of the outcome is, they're the ones that have to handle it. So I would love to create something that's there for them.
Well, speaking of being a parent, one thing I failed to mention in the intro, and probably your biggest achievement yet, is you are the mother of a beautiful little boy. So I know he's obviously not, going to grow up in the female athlete space, but hopefully he grows up in a space where male and female athletes are treated equally. But what sort of a world do you want him growing up in terms of, let's focus more on the sporting space? What do you think would be the ideal?
Yeah, I mean, he's also a November baby, so I've shunned him there in the bad age. So he's not going to get picked up. He's going to be slowly developing. Yeah, I mean, I hope he he's been on tour with me already in Thailand, and he comes to trainings, and he's around a lot. So I hope more than anything he learns that sport is the place to make connections and to an opportunity for you to be there for other people. And it can be really fun to do that. And it can also be really fun to work hard. I think that's the thing that sport can give. So I think there's some lessons there for him. You know, it's hard to know what the world will look like in 5 years. It's all accelerating so fast. But I think, you know, if sport's not what he wants to do, that's totally, I always make the joke, he's definitely not a volleyball player. He will not play volleyball, because it does worry me in that sense of what it might look like for him. But I think it's just, if he's willing to work hard in whatever he is going to do it, if it is sport, that the opportunities are fair and even for him. And those that work hard, I think there's always going to be a little bit of luck involved, but that doors are still available to keep opening for everybody that's willing to work hard for them. John Cena talks to this amazingly, actually. I actually really love listening to him. But if you're coachable, if you're reliable, if you're willing to work hard, then you may not win every single time, but you continue to open doors for yourself, and eventually you'll have the small wins along the way. And I just hope whatever the sport is that he chooses, or if it's outside of sport, that is actually true for him, and that is always a person first. For sure.
Yeah, no, love that. And also, like you've touched on it, it's the people you meet in sport and the doors that they open for you. It's a brilliant networking opportunity, and people that you played sport with when you were, 5 years old. Like, it's amazing how you come back into contact with these people down the line, and then they might be your next business partner or who knows what. But I think some of my biggest opportunities have come indirectly through people I know through sport. So it's a massive networking opportunity as well.
Yeah, there's nothing. I've actually just had to make friends for the first time.
Awful, isn't it? As an adult.
I went to a baby bounce at the library and just went up to a mum and said hi, and then had to make friends that way. I've always just been on teams and just made friends with teams, and then progressively made friends from there. And so actually having to make friends outside of that is, I think it's a great lesson to learn. But I've been really lucky in that sense that sport just gives you that chance to just, you've already got one thing in common with somebody, and that's sometimes it. Again, same as the coaching thing, you just need one thing, one person, and it's a beautiful ability to just spend time with people, which is inevitably how we come together anyway.
Now, if you could go back and talk to the young Kel who started volleyball, who was extremely shy, introverted and nervous about it all, what would you go back and tell her?
That she's enough. That, you don't have to say a million things, and you don't have to, but just go up, say hi, say how are ya, and ask to pepper, which is the first thing you do when you go into a volleyball court, is you pepper with someone. Just ask someone to pepper with you and it'll be all right. You'll find them. I think it's, again, connection piece first. I was just too afraid to go, hey, and just find my way in, and that you're enough. I think that's always a common thread for a lot of people, is not feeling good enough. I certainly felt that for a long time. So once I've got to the point of, it's particularly in this space that I think, I've got things to offer. I always did. I just didn't know about them. Just you're enough, and you will find your person. You won't find everybody, but you'll find somebody.
Yeah, I think that's a really common thread that I hear with a lot of athletes, including myself, is that deep down you've come up with these self-limiting beliefs somewhere along the way that you're not enough, so that you have to consistently perform and win and achieve to prove that you're enough. But it doesn't matter how many gold medals you win or, the highest team you get to, that's not going to prove that you're enough. It's the person that you are, the values that you have, and how you make other people feel. Like, that is where your real worth comes from, not your performance.
Yeah, no, it's a mantra. You got to say it all the time, but it's absolutely true. And I think it's paramount for everybody to keep finding it. And again, just like you, I have to keep telling myself that, particularly at the moment, being a mum, like, okay, I am enough for him. I have to be.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kel, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all about your experiences. And you've achieved some incredible things over your life, and you've got so many more to achieve. And I just hope that you sit back and are really proud of everything that you've done and how far you've come, and also, and probably more importantly, the path that you are laying for the next generation to come through and hopefully have some better experiences than you did in some ways. So thank you so much. And if the listeners would like to jump on and follow you or look at Lean Edge, where can they go?
Yeah, we've got an Instagram that'll link you to a website, and we're live and operating, and you can just follow along there and get in touch that way if there's ever anything. But thank you, Kylie. We need more people like you talking about these things, and you've had such great great guest. I feel really honored to be chatting to you today.
Oh, we only get the best on, Kel. So very, very honored to have you on. But to everyone listening, if you've taken value from this episode, I'm sure you have. I know I have taken plenty. Please share it with someone. Share it with a parent who might need to hear it. Share it with a friend or an athlete who needs to hear it, or even a coach. The more that we can send these conversations around and build the awareness around what some athletes have been through so that we can change the experience of our future athletes, that is what is most important. So please send this episode on, like and subscribe to 4TG. That is what helps us grow so that we can keep having these brilliant conversations, and just stay in sport, because sport, as Kel has said, is one of the best things for nearly every reason other than competing itself. So thank you very much for listening. We'll see you all next week. And this one was brought to you by Project Better.